All right, so I didn't realize I didn't have chapter 18 done, so I might try and get this done quick. So if I go a little fast, sorry, and I'll try and keep it kind of to the key points and get through the sections as quickly as I can here. So chapter 18, French Revolution, Napoleon, causes, effects, and then how did the revolution end up leading to the Napoleonic era? So on the eve of revolution, the storming of the Bastille. So the Bastille Day is like our 4th of July. That's what the French celebrate. And then how is that going to start the French Revolution? So we're going to look at the social divisions, which is very important for understanding why it happened, as well as the economic troubles. The attempts that Louis XIV made and what happened as he tried to make those changes, and then eventually the Parisian storming the Bastille. So when we look at the French society, it's divided up into three parts. You've got the first estate, which is the clergy, like priests, that type of thing. The second estate, which is like nobility, those would be like lords and dukes and all that type of stuff. And then the third estate would be the common people, everybody else. So what you've got here, the right-hand corner, is a political cartoon showing the first and the second estate enjoying a free ride off of the backs of the commoners. So if you look at the population, land ownership, and government taxation, you can see that the third estate, granted it's 98% of the population, but when you look at wealth, they don't have much of the wealth, but they're the ones that are paying 100% of the taxes. And so this is a system that's rigged for the clergy and as well as the nobility. For the nobility, they're the only ones that have access to some of the best jobs, especially in the government and in the military, and you can use those positions to accumulate more wealth. And so the nobles paid some taxes, but not really much. I mean, it still basically comes down to the third estate is paying almost 100% of the taxes. The third estate. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is this is a very diverse group. So if you look at that chart on the right-hand column, they're middle class, they're peasants, they're poor city workers, they're doctors, they're lawyers. This is a really interesting mix of people. By far, though, the biggest are the rural peasants. And even if they don't pay that much monetarily in taxes, one of the things that they resent is they have to pay what is known as the corvée. They owe so much time to working on governmental projects, roads, bridges, whatever. So even if they're not paying money, they have to still donate a good chunk of their year to doing work for someone else. Now, when we look at the financial problems, Louis XIV is inheriting debt. So it's not just his fault, but boy, is he going to rack it up even more so. You've got the century of warfare between the British and the French, and so that's going to rack up a bunch of debt. The French help us tremendously financially during the American Revolution, and so they're sending us money when they have their own problems. And then when you look at building the Palace of Versailles, that's just going to add more onto the debt. Now, they do try and make some changes. Louis XIV has Necker come in and he gives him all kinds of suggestions on how to cut expenses and then also increase revenue. And Necker basically says the first and the second estates need to be taxed. We need to get money from those people who have money because we can't keep squeezing the third estate and think that we can get more blood out of a stone. That just isn't going to happen. The problem is the first and the second estate just absolutely positively refuse to be taxed. They don't want any part of it. So when this Estates General meets, Louis XIV calls the Estates General together because he's going to need buy-in if there's going to be this kind of economic reform. The problem is the third estate shows up and they have a whole list of grievances. They had a whole list of things that they wanted to be changed. And when they realized that there wasn't going to be a change in the way the vote took place, they wanted to have it based on per person. Each person has a vote rather than the first estate having a vote, the second estate having a vote, and the third estate having a vote. In that case, there's only 3 votes taken. The first and the second estate always go together, which means the third estate always loses. When they realized there was going to be no give on this, the National Assembly then goes to the tennis court and they take an oath where they are going to work tirelessly until they can create a constitution. Now, the problem also here is with all of this uncertainty, and especially without there being food and bread and all the economic troubles, all kinds of rumors are circulating about what's happening and what's going on. And one of the things that Louis XIV is concerned about is all of these people who are so upset. And so he's bringing the military in to kind of be there just in case. But anyway, the rumor gets spread that he is bringing in the military to attack the third estate essentially. And with that, the people of Paris just can't handle it. It's too much. So the rumors are too much. There's not good enough communication. Louis XIV didn't do a good enough job of kind of getting out front and getting his message out there of what's happening. And so all of this breaks kind of down into chaos. And so the commoners look at this Bastille, this fortress that is symbolic of, I guess, the power of the monarchy and the corruptness of the system. And so by storming the Bastille, they're sending a very clear message that the old way of doing things probably is no longer very acceptable. And that's kind of why it marks the beginning of this revolution.